What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Appreciate you being here today. You can also follow the podcast at Pack a Day Podcast. Of course, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment below to help that good old-fashioned YouTube algorithm. Really appreciate that. But we've got a lot to discuss today. I want to go over a little bit of a youth movement that I think has been flying under the radar in Green Bay. But before we get there, I want to talk some news and notes, as I do pretty much every single day. Let's start off with the Raiders of all teams. The Raiders announced that they are benching Derek Carr, going with Jarrett Stidham moving forward. And not that this affects Green Bay really in any capacity, at least not right now. We'll talk more about that in just a second. But the reason that this is interesting is, of course, because Davante Adams asked out of Green Bay because he wanted to go to Las Vegas for really two reasons. One, he wanted to be closer to family, which he accomplished. There's no question about that. And that was probably really the main thing that he wanted to get, and he got that out of it. So there's no taking that away. But he also wanted stability at the quarterback position. And one of the huge reasons that he wanted to move on was because he wasn't sure what was going to happen with Aaron Rodgers moving forward, and not knowing year by year if he was going to come back. He wanted stability at that position, and it certainly didn't hurt, and was a huge factor as well that Derek Carr was his best friend, and he wanted to go back and play with his college teammate and play in Vegas together with Derek Carr. So all of that sort of made sense in the calculus of what Davante Adams put together for his reasoning as to why he wanted to go to Vegas from Green Bay. The issue, of course, is that now Derek Carr is being benched, and the talk is that he will either be released or traded in the offseason. The reason that they're benching him now is because if he were to get hurt, his contract would become guaranteed for next season, and then they couldn't make any moves with him. So this is going to be a very interesting situation to keep an eye on. I know there's going to be differing thoughts on, should you feel bad for Davante? He had the opportunity, he had the choice. He could have stayed in Green Bay. He decided he wanted out. I understand the he made his bed, he has to lay in it sort of thinking. Tough scene, though, for Davante, somebody that was beloved as a Green Bay Packer. I know most people still are cheering him on and hoping he does well in Vegas. Certainly tough for him that now he does not have that stability at quarterback, and is going to have to, the Raiders are going to have to sort of start from scratch at quarterback if they do go in a different position, which could hurt Davante as well. So we'll kind of have to keep an eye on that. But now those rumors are going to start, right? The Packers have two quarterbacks. They have Jordan Love, they have Aaron Rodgers. Both are familiar, very familiar with Davante Adams, or at least Davante Adams is very familiar with both of them. Could one of them end up with the Raiders in some sort of trade this offseason? That will be as the Aaron Rodgers drama turns in this offseason that we're not going to get into today, but trust me, I'm sure those rumors will be out there. There's also rumors that Tom Brady could reunite with Josh McDaniels. Just get ready for what could be an incredible quarterback carousel in the offseason, and Derek Carr, the Raiders, could be involved at that. And it just gives us a quick second to look at sort of this Davante Adams trade. We're a long way from knowing who won and lost that trade. You can make a strong argument that at the moment, there really hasn't been a winner, right? The Raiders were hoping to win now with Davante Adams, give up a first and a second, some really premium assets for a win now player who's entering his 30s in Davante Adams. And that has not worked. They are not going to be a playoff team this year. Now their quarterback is benched, and they're probably going to have to go in a different direction in the offseason. So that's a tough scene for them. For the Packers, they were in win now mode and really needed Davante for this season. We've seen the offense sort of sputter to start the season. We've seen signs as of late with these rookie receivers stepping up, but this is a Packers team that also could miss the playoffs. They're still alive right now. And then for Davante, we just talked about it, right? Wanted to go to Vegas, play close to his family. He accomplishes that, but wanted to play with Carr and have stability at quarterback. He no longer has either of those things either. So tough to say that there's a pure winner. I will say that looking at it as of today, as of right now, I do think Green Bay looks the best coming out of this. The Raiders were in a win now mode and made a win now move, and it didn't work with Adams. And now they have a win now player and are going to have to make a decision. They don't have really a win now window. So that's a tough scene for them. We talked about Adams, and for Green Bay, yeah, it sucks that they didn't get Adams in what was clearly a win now season for Green Bay, but they were able to get, really Quay Walker and a good chunk of Christian Watson out of that trade, plus add other assets via free agency, like guys like Rasul Douglas, Jaron Reed, etc. So if I had to choose right now, I would say Green Bay ends up the better of this, and I very much doubt, and maybe I'm wrong, Could certainly be wrong, but I doubt that Christian Watson's on this team right now if they had kept Davante Adams. So just even getting him out of the deal could go a long way in making this deal look good for Green Bay long term. So that's one of the big NFL pieces of news. From a Packers standpoint, we had some news as well. Aaron Rodgers was out of practice on Wednesday with a knee injury that he suffered against the Dolphins. He played through that injury, so it doesn't seem like it's going to be anything that keeps him out or anything to worry about, but the fact that he wasn't able to practice is never a great sign, but he should be good to go this week against the Vikings. Keyshawn Nixon and Christian Watson also did not practice. David Bakhtiari practiced in a limited capacity, and then Yosh Nijman did practice as well. So good news along the offensive line, bad news for playmaking when it comes to Keyshawn Nixon and Christian Watson, and then you never want to see QB1 on the injury report either, but like I said, he should be ready to go this week. One other note that I wanted to put out there really quick, and I mentioned this on Twitter yesterday as well, Christian Watson. You guys know I do my grades every single week. I grade every player. I've done it since 2017 now, every player on every play. Christian Watson since week 9 has a plus 5.5 grade. My highest graded Packer this season so far is Aaron Jones with a plus 5.6 grade. So just since week 9, just from week 9 to this past week, week 17, and remember there's a bye in there as well, or week 16, excuse me. There's a bye in there as well. Watson is a plus 5.5 and almost ready to pass my highest graded Packer on the season in Aaron Jones at 5.6. Now, Watson had negative grades in week 1 and week 2, which is bringing that overall grade down further. But if you just go since week 9, he has been on an absolute tear. So hopefully he can come back sooner rather than later. But the other thing I wanted to mention there is you go back to 2021. Aaron Rodgers was the MVP. Davante Adams was one of the best, if not the best, wide receiver in football. Those two players averaged 0.02 points per play last season, which was 1 and 2 on the team in 2021 when I graded those players through the entirety of the season. Since week 9, Christian Watson is at plus 0.018, so just 0.02 under Rodgers and Adams. Now, Rodgers and Adams did that for an entirety of a season, and Watson just did that from week 9 through week 16 with a bye week being in there, and he's a long way from a finished product, and you have to do that consistently to get put in that stratosphere. But talk about freaking upside for a player who is just starting to come into his own as a rookie, missed the offseason, missed games earlier this year, probably not at 100%, and he's putting up that sort of grading and statistical numbers and all of it. Like I said yesterday, he is changing this offense on the fly because of his capabilities and his abilities on offense. He is a special player, and if he can continue any sort of trajectory here, he is on pace to become a legit home run playmaker that, like I said, is changing this Packers offense on the fly. It's really, really fun to see, and the numbers are really starting to support just what we're sort of seeing on a week-to-week basis on the game tape. He's a stud. He's a certified stud, and he's really coming into his own in front of our eyes. All right, so that gets us to our main topic for today, and that's the sort of underlying youth movement in Green Bay. 2 days ago, the Packers picked up Bo Melton from the Seahawks practice squad. Doesn't really matter all that much in the entire scheme of things, but he actually was drafted in the 7th round of this year's draft, in the 2022 draft. And if you look at Green Bay's roster right now, it's a 53-man roster. Of the 53 players on the Packers roster, 11 of them, a shocking 11, were 2022 NFL draft picks. Were drafted, not just rookies, not undrafted guys, were actually drafted in this past year's draft. You've got Quay Walker at pick 22, Devontae Wyatt at 28, Watson at pick 34, Dobbs at pick 132, Zach Tom at pick 140, Enigbare at 179, Luke Tenuta, who they were able to claim earlier this offseason. I think he was a Chargers draft pick, or a Bills draft pick, and then he was claimed by the Colts, and then the Colts waived him, and then the Packers claimed him after that. But Luke Tenuta was picked 209. Tariq Carpenter was picked 228. Bo Melton was one pick later at 229. Jonathan Ford, 234. Rasheed Walker, 249. And Samori Toure, 258. They have 11 draft picks on their 53-man roster. In addition, they have 2 undrafted free agents on their 53-man roster in Caleb Jones and Jack Coco, their long snapper. So 13 of their 53 on the active roster right now are rookies from this year's draft class. That is almost 25% of the entire team. So 1 out of every 4 players on the team, on the 53-man roster, is a rookie from this year. That's really incredible. Now, it's one thing to have rookies, right? It's great to have youth. It's great to have rookies. It's great to have players you can develop. Those are all really good things. But it's another when those players are making an impact for you. We know Quay Walker is starting at inside linebacker. Christian Watson's your starting wide receiver. Romeo Doubs is a starting wide receiver. And Igbari starting along the edge, mostly due to the injury to Rashawn Gary, but he would have been a strong rotational player anyway. And right now, it doesn't matter who's in and out. He is starting. Recently, Zach Tom has been starting at left tackle and playing very, very well. And you can argue that Devonte Wyatt is going to be, in a starting caliber role moving forward. Probably not a true starter, but probably getting into that 25, 30 snaps per game range, which is a true rotational defensive lineman. So you're talking about not just young players on the team, but young players that are making an impact, and young players who are making an impact at premium positions: inside linebacker, edge rusher, defensive line, starting left tackle, starting wide receivers, etc. These are impact players at impact positions. You also have Tariq Carpenter, who is a core player on your special teams, Samori Toure, who's getting snaps at wide receiver, and Jack Coco, who's legitimately your long snapper, who is on every special teams play that involves a long snapper. So they are getting a ton of ROI from this draft class. And also, that doesn't even include Sean Rhyan, who is a 3rd round pick from this year and currently suspended. And the early returns from Sean Rhyan have not been great. He did not look the part in training camp. Of all the, offensive line issues earlier this season, Sean Rhyan couldn't even get in the conversation to be on the playing field. And then he gets suspended for PEDs. So a lot going on there, but that's just another player that is on the roster in some capacity who was a 3rd round pick just this past year. So they are loaded right now with young, talented players and players that they are developing. And one thing we should note here is that a couple things. In some capacity, the Packers had to do this, right? They have a top-loaded roster full of players they're paying a ton of money to. And when you do that, you have to supplement with the bottom of your roster making very little money. And the best way, and really kind of the only way to do that, is by paying young rookies, undrafted free agents, etc., basically bare minimum deals. So when you have a team that is as top-heavy with contracts as the Packers are, you do have to supplement your roster with young players, and that's exactly what the Packers did, and that's why you have 13 players who are rookies on the 53-man roster. In addition, this isn't exactly something new to the Ted Thompson, Ron Wolf, Brian Gutekunst regime, right? They've always been a draft and develop team. They've always been a team that is relying on the youth and the younger players and trying to develop them over the course of a season, et cetera, et cetera. So definitely worth noting. I think definitely has flied under the radar a little bit, but also not something totally unexpected based on how their roster was set up and based on how Green Bay likes to operate. Then we take it one step further, right? And I always like to look a year ahead, 2 years ahead to see like what the status and state of the team is. If you look right now at the players who are 27 years or over 27 years old, so 28 or older, here are your current Packers on the roster who are 28 years or older. Rudy Ford, free agent. Aaron Jones, contract is interesting, although I'd expect him back in some capacity, probably on a restructured deal, no matter what this offseason, but it's a little bit interesting. Dallin Leavitt, free agent. Robert Tonyan, free agent. Eric Wilson, free agent. Dean Lowry, free agent. Adrian Amos, his contract will void, making him a free agent. Devondre Campbell at age 29 right now will be back. Jerron Reed, free agent. Preston Smith's contract is very interesting. Bakhtiari's contract is very interesting. Pat O'Donnell could easily get competition and they could save money. He's 31 years old. He's not a young punter. So that's an interesting one. Randall Cobb probably tied to Aaron Rodgers. Mason Crosby probably playing his last year as a Packer. Although that is a little bit more in question now because he's been kicking really great as of late. So you never know there, but that's at least in question. Mercedes Lewis probably tied to Rodgers or could just retire at his age. And then Aaron Rodgers, who we have no idea what's going to happen with him, right? So you have got this group of players of 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 players who are currently 28 years or older. And it's really difficult to pinpoint anyone like really outside of Devondre Campbell, maybe Aaron Jones, that you can say like wholeheartedly for sure is going to be back no matter what. So if all of these players all of a sudden do end up leaving, either via Green Bay's decision to go young, or some of these players retire, or just choose alternatives in free agency, it's really going to be important that the Green Bay Packers have a core of young players that they can lean on as they start to rebuild this team moving forward. So if you look at this team right now, just with younger players, I always want to look at, all right, what could a potential depth chart look like? If all those 28-year or older players end up leaving, and if you don't add a single player in free agency and you don't draft a single player, what does sort of the skeleton of your roster look like? So here it is. Jordan Love at quarterback, A.J. Dillon at running back, Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, and Samori Toure at wide receiver, Josiah DeGuara at tight end, Zach Tom at left tackle, Elton Jenkins at left guard, Josh Myers at center, John Runyon Jr. at right guard, and Yosh Nijman at right tackle. It's not ideal. Let's start there. Like all of a sudden, losing Randall Cobb and, Tunyon and Mercedes Lewis, Aaron Jones, Aaron Rodgers, of course, David Bakhtiari, that's not going to help your offense, right? But we've seen some signs from Love. Dillon is getting a good share of the workload right now. Watson and Dobbs are your receiver 1 and 2 basically right now. DeGuara, not a true tight end. You need an upgrade there no matter what. They just don't have a pure, really good tight end on the roster anyway. And then basically what your offensive line has been the past 3 weeks. Tom, Jenkins, Myers, Runyon, and Nijman. So not ideal, but you've got a skeleton of a start of a roster. And again, that's just saying that nobody comes back. You don't draft a single player, which we know is absurd, and you don't sign a single player, which we know is absurd. So even in a weirdo, bizarro, crazy scenario, that's not terrible. It's not good. It's not better. It's not good enough, but you at least have a legitimate starting offense there. And then on defense, Devontae Wyatt, Kenny Clark, TJ Slayton along the defensive line, Rashawn Gary and JJ Enagbare at the edge, Quay Walker at inside linebacker, Jair Alexander, Eric Stokes, Rasul Douglas at corner, Darnell Savage, and I don't know, maybe a Tariq Carpenter at safety. Again, you're going to lose some guys. Losing Preston Smith's not going to help you. I didn't include Devondre Campbell, even though he's a guarantee to be on the roster based on his contract. But you lose Jerron Reed, you lose Dean Lowry, you lose some players, but Wyatt, Clark, Slayton, Gary Enagbare, Wyatt, Jair, Stokes, Rasul, Savage, those are all guys who are playing legitimate snaps right now. You kind of have the core of your defense. And in fact, I could argue that defense with Rashawn Gary is far better than the defense that they're actually rolling out right now. So all of this is to say is I know that Green Bay is going to have some salary cap issues moving forward. And I know that the decisions of what happens with Aaron Rodgers and the rest of the, kind of the veterans on this team is going to affect this team. But it also should be noted that this team has a very sound and solid core that needs help. They would need to add playmakers. They were very clear. Even this team as a whole right now isn't good enough. So I'm not saying that losing those players like Green Bay's just set for the foreseeable future. They're not. But they do have a core that they can build around, that they can continue to get better. And if they draft well again next year, maybe add another Rasul Douglas, Devondre Campbell here or there, and just, have a couple players step up. Who knows? This team could be back competing sooner rather than later, even in a terrible, catastrophic, worst case scenario. And all of those names that I just mentioned as the core skeleton group of that team, that doesn't even include developmental players who are currently on the roster like Bo Melton, Caleb Jones, Royce Newman, Rasheed Walker, Luke Tenuta, Tyler Davis, Patrick Taylor, Jonathan Ford, Isaiah McDuffie, Shamar Jean Charles, Innis Gaines, Micah Abernathy, Tyler Goodson, Vernon Scott, Sean Ryan. All those guys are guys that are currently being developed on the roster with the hopes that maybe they can become decent players in the next year or two. So this is following the general draft and develop formula. Whether or not it can work and turn into something special down the road is going to be worth keeping an eye on, and we'll have to monitor that moving forward. But really like kind of the skeleton core of this team, and I think they have something to build off of, and have sort of done a really nice job under the radar of building this really nice young core without getting sort of the credit for it that maybe is deserved. So again, if all the veterans leave, if they don't add anyone in free agency, if they fail on all their draft picks, etc., you're not going to have a good enough team, but you have a young core that can still be developed, and I do think they're in a better spot than people are giving them credit for. That is going to do it for me today. Thank you so much for joining me. Of course, I'll be right back here tomorrow. It will be Friday, which will be Mike Wall Friday, so always look forward to that. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.